In February 2014, a cave dive in Norway's Plura cave turned tragic, leading to the deaths of some of the divers, while the others narrowly escaped. In February 2014, a team of Finnish cave divers planned on diving through the Plura cave, or Plura, traverse its underwater passages, and emerge from the Steinuggleflåge cave. Such a dive required intricate planning, expertise, and specialized equipment given the sub-zero temperatures, challenging passages, and a cave's depth. First, Patrik Rönnqvist and Jari Houtarinen cut a triangle-shaped hole in the ice with a chainsaw and jump into the ice-cold water with their equipment. As there are two people called Jari in this story, I will refer to them as Jari H and Jari U. After the first two divers had jumped in and the sediment had settled, the remaining three divers would jump in after them. The plan was for this to happen 2 hours after the first divers had gone in. Most amateur divers will only dive for between 30 to 60 minutes. The trip ahead of the 5 Finnish divers would be a 5-hour dive through a dark and narrow cave with cold water. Patrick and Jari H swam through the narrow cave. As Patrick passed the deepest section of the cave, 110 meters or about 360 feet, he noticed that Jari H wasn't behind him any longer. He swam back to find Jari H, who was stuck in a narrow part of the cave, as well as entangled in some of his equipment. Jari signaled with his flashlight that he was in distress. Patrick saw that Jari was about to panic, and feared this would lead to him breathing faster than his rebreather could recycle his air. In order to help him, Patrick tried giving Jari a canister of gas. However, Jari was panicking at this point, so when Jari was switching from his rebreather to the gas, he started breathing in water. Patrick watched in horror, realizing he could do nothing for his friend. In order to avoid the same fate, he had to make sure he himself remained calm, despite what was happening in front of him. Unable to do anything for his friend or move the body, Patrick knew he had to continue. The extra time he had spent trying to help Jari H had led to him having to spend more hours for decompression stops than he had planned. He also knew that soon the 3 others in the cave dive would find Jari H. Stuck there, in the darkness of the cave, stopping for hours for decompression stops, he spent a lot of that time worrying about the 3 other divers and how they would react when they would see their friend passed away and blocking their way. They would either have to pass the body and risk panicking, and even if they passed him, this would take time, and they probably wouldn't have enough air to do their decompression stops, meaning they could suffer long-lasting effects of decompression sickness if they survive. Patrick would eventually make it to the end of the cave, where he could surface and then climb out of the cave entrance. He waited there after completing the dive. Back underwater, Vesa Rantanen was the first of the 3 divers to pass the deepest section of the cave. As he did so, he heard a beeping noise. It was the distress noise of a rebreather. He found the source. It was Jari H's body. He was now faced with a decision. He could try to pass the body, risking panic himself, or he could take the long swim back the way he came. Weighing the pros and cons of each decision, he decided the best decision would be to try and swim past his friend's body. He made the choice quickly, as each passing minute at this depth would require longer decompression stops and air he didn't have. The second of the 3 divers was Jari Usumaki, or Jari U, as I will call him from now on. It is unknown exactly what happened to him here. It is believed he panicked when he saw the body in the narrow cave. The final diver of the 3, Kai Kankinen, saw Jari as he was panicking and tried to come to his aid. However, his recollection of the events is unclear. What is clear is that Yari Yu drowned in front of him. Kai proceeded and found the body of Yari H, with Vesa struggling to kick and squeeze his way past the remains of their friend. Kai asked for Vesa to swim back with him. He feared Vesa would overexert himself or panic and then die. He was now facing the same decision as the two divers before him. He could attempt to press on, waiting and hoping Vesa would manage to squeeze past Yari H's body, or he could swim back the way he came. Believing that Vesa might not make it, and unsure of what had happened to Patrick, he chose to take the long swim back. Here's something you should know about Kai. The year before this dive, Kai had lost a long-time diving partner. This caused him to quit diving, but this only lasted a few months. After starting up again and doing another dive, someone else he was diving with also died. So it is understandable that he chose to turn around. It was the only sure path he had. Vesa kept trying, and it took him at least 15 minutes to pass by Yari's body. The extra time spent at that depth added an additional 3 hours to his decompression time. Unfortunately for Vesa, he did not have enough breathable air to complete his decompression stops. He decided to go for the more urgent need for air and handle the decompression sickness later. 80 minutes too early, he resurfaced in the cave at the end of the dive where Patrick was waiting for him. Shortly after resurfacing, he started feeling the effects of decompression sickness, with pains in his knees and elbows that grew significantly more painful over the next few hours. Patrick was also feeling the decompression sickness, having surfaced 30 minutes earlier than he should. A little more than 11 hours after having jumped through the hole in the ice, more than twice the time they had planned on spending in the ice-cold water, Kai came back to find the hole in the ice frozen shut. He was able to break the ice, as the ice layer was quite thin, and resurface from the cold water. Alone and cold, he got out of the water, walked over to the car, turned on the engine and lights, and lied down. Patrick and Vesa saw that the lights were on and found Kai resting in the car. All three of the surviving divers were hospitalized with varying degrees of decompression sickness. I'll give you a short summary of what decompression sickness is. Decompression sickness is injuries caused by a rapid change of pressure. It happens when you ascend too quickly, and the nitrogen you're breathing in during the dive does not have time to dissolve, forming bubbles in your bloodstream. It is nicknamed the bends because the joint pain that comes from it can cause you to bend over in pain because of its severity. It can last for days or weeks, and has in a few cases caused death. The Norwegian police took their statements from the three divers and closed the Plura cave. Later, Rick Stanton was asked to recover the bodies of the two divers. If his name sounds familiar, it's because he is a world-renowned rescue and recovery diver. He was one of the divers who helped rescue the Thai youth who were trapped in the Tham Luang cave in 2018. He was also familiar with the Plura cave. However, after diving down there, he considered the body recovery too risky. The only way they could recover the bodies was through starting at the same point the other divers had started and do the whole dive. Efforts to recover the bodies were then abandoned by Norwegian authorities. Patrick returned home to Finland. At some point, he was in touch with the widow of Yari H, the first diver who had drowned. Of this, he has said, "I told her that we would go and get them. I told her that they are not going to be left there." In the previous year, 2013, during his initial traverse of the Plura caves, Patrick had embarked on this challenging expedition alongside Kai Kankinen and a third teammate, Sami Pakarinen. At the time of the accident, Sami was far away in Mexico, engaged in teaching a diving course. The moment he noticed an unsettling stream of 10 missed calls and 10 messages on his phone, he immediately sensed that something had gone awry. This made quite an impact on Sami. This heart-wrenching situation was made worse by the fact that Sami had played a pivotal role in training the victims, considering them not just as students, but as close friends. When Patrick returned to Finland, he promised the widow of Jari H. that they would retrieve the bodies, and when he checked with the other 2 survivors in Sami, they all had the same idea. They were just waiting for his text. However, there was another challenge they had. The recovery had to be done in secret. Though the renowned recovery diver Rick Stanton had deemed the recovery mission too risky, the Finnish divers believed they had a unique advantage over the British divers. They had done the dive before. The risks were still there, but they were familiar with the cave. There was, however, a possible disadvantage they had. They knew the victims they were rescuing, and you can never really be sure how you'll react to recovering the body of someone you know. Sami says that to prepare for this, they spent time processing their emotions relating to this before the dive. Their goal was to get all this out of the way so that when the time came, they would be able to focus on the task at hand. On the 22nd of March, it all began. 27 people, 17 Finns, and 10 Norwegians descended into the Plura Valley. The first step to this 5-day operation was to transport about a metric ton of gear to the entrance to the cave. They spent about a day setting up the equipment. A part of this was leaving 50 canisters of breathable gas along their route. On the 3rd day, the 24th of March, the divers began the recovery itself. Sami, Patrick, and Kai descended into the cold waters to retrieve their friends. Vesa, who was still suffering some of the effects from the decompression sickness from the last dive, stayed on the surface as their dive manager. Not too long after they had gone below the surface, Kai returned. He decided to sit this one out and try again the next day, as he hadn't slept well and simply wasn't in the right frame of mind for such an operation. He eventually decided to not dive at all, and who can blame him? Sami and Patrick kept diving. They passed Jari U, the second diver who had passed away during the previous dive. They proceeded until they reached Jari H, who was the first. They cut off his equipment in order to free the body. They navigated his body through the narrow pass. Then Patrick, with the help of a dive scooter, towed Jari H's body towards the end of their route. There they were welcomed by Vesa. Patrick said, "I've been thinking about this every single night since I walked out of here. Last time, I didn't know whether to come back up or stay down there. If we had done a practice run then, things would have been different. It was totally our own fault." The following day, Sami and Patrick returned, assisted by another diver, Jani Santala. However, Jari U's body proved to be a lot more difficult to recover. It was much more buoyant and harder to control. Just to point out a few reasons why this is dangerous. When the world record-holding cave diver, Dave Shaw, was retrieving a body in Bushman's Hole, the body was much more buoyant than they had anticipated. This made some of the wires from his equipment and lines from the body bag get tangled around different parts of his body. While trying to get free, his breathing increased to beyond what his rebreather could recycle, and he passed away from hypercapnia. That's just one possible scenario when recovering a significantly buoyant body. As the Finnish divers struggled to get the body through the caves, a part of the cave almost collapsed on Sami. They made it to the surface with Jari U's remains, but it took time as they had to take several breaks along the way because of the difficulty of transporting him. They placed the remains of Jari Huotarinen and Jari Uusumaki in each their body bag. The whole operation had taken approximately 101 diving hours divided among the crew, and having now retrieved their friends, the divers held a moment of silence for them. The following afternoon, after retrieving the remains of their friends, they called the local police station and informed them of their illegal recovery dive. Sami had the impression that the police were pleased that they had recovered the bodies. The police did, however, inform them that since the divers had broken some rules, the police would have to investigate. 6 months later, the group was informed that they would not face any charges for their illegal dive. Sometime after returning home, Patrick was nominated by his colleagues at the fire service for the first-class medal of the White Rose of Finland, which the President of Finland awarded him. In summary, the Plura cave incident of 2014 was a tragic event that took the lives of 2 experienced divers. When it comes to why somebody would do something as risky as cave diving as a hobby, I've come to know that it is something I don't understand unless I try it. There has been one documentary about the incident called Diving into the Unknown that I recommend. I want to end this with something Juan Reyna, the director behind the documentary, said about why cave divers do this. It's not that they are just enjoying the thrill of risking their lives. There's more to it than that. It's their calling. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to learn more about this, my sources are in the description, and corrections also if there are any, or you can just search for it in your favorite search engine. If you feel I deserve it, you can click the like button or subscribe, and I hope you enjoyed the video and that you'll watch my next one too.